I swear, Leon used to be different when we first met at that community center food drive thing. Like, he actually had some backbone back then. I remember watching him organize all those canned goods and thinking, okay, this guy's got his stuff together. He's not some loser living in his mom's basement. Plus, he was actually cute in that quiet, stable way, not like those dramatic idiots I usually dated who were all flash and no substance. I made the first move, obviously, because he was way too shy to approach someone like me. Honestly, I probably did him the biggest favor of his life by even giving him a chance. Most women would have walked right past him, but I saw potential. I saw a guy who would actually appreciate having someone like me in his life. The church ladies there kept giving me these looks like they couldn't believe I was talking to him, which just proved my point. They'd probably been trying to set him up with their boring daughters for months, and here I come along and actually get his attention. I was wearing this cute sundress that day. Nothing too flashy, but definitely showed. I took care of myself, unlike some of the frumpy volunteers there. When I complimented his organizational skills and suggested we grab coffee sometime, his whole face lit up like Christmas morning. It was actually pretty sweet how grateful he seemed. Like he couldn't believe someone like me would notice him. Those first few months were actually really nice. Leon was so attentive, always planning these thoughtful little dates, bringing me flowers, actually listening when I talked about my day. He had this modest apartment that was clean and organized, not like the disaster zones most guys my age lived in. When we talked about our futures, we were totally on the same page about not wanting kids. I mean, who has time for that chaos when you're trying to build a real life together? He seemed so mature compared to the other guys I dated, so focused on actual partnership instead of just hooking up and playing games. After about a year of dating, I started staying over at his place more often, and everything just felt comfortable. He cooked these amazing dinners. We'd watch movies, talk about everything. I loved how predictable he was, how I never had to wonder where I stood with him or worry about him playing games. When he brought up moving in together after 2 years, it felt like the natural next step. By year 3, we were talking marriage, and honestly, I felt pretty satisfied with my choice. Leon was stable, devoted, completely focused on me. I'd found exactly what I was looking for. The engagement was perfect. Nothing flashy or over the top, just him and me, and this beautiful ring he'd saved up for months to buy. We had this long conversation about our future, about building something real together, about being partners in everything. He kept saying how lucky he felt to have found me, how he wanted to spend his whole life making me happy. It was exactly what every woman wants to hear. Someone who actually values what they have instead of always looking for something better. The wedding planning was mostly smooth, though Leon could be a little too cautious about spending sometimes. I mean, you only get married once, right? But he was worried about staying within budget, making sure we had money left over for the house down payment, which was actually pretty smart. Looking back, we ended up with this cute little ceremony, nothing too crazy, just our families and close friends. His brother gave this speech about how Leon had never been happier, how I'd brought out this whole new side of him. Even my parents seemed impressed with how solid and dependable he was. The first couple years of marriage were okay, I guess. We settled into this routine where Leon would go to work. I'd handle my stuff, and we'd spend evenings together cooking dinner and catching up. He was still doing those volunteer things, always trying to get me involved in community projects and charity drives. Sometimes I'd go along just to support him. But honestly, it wasn't really my scene. I had my own friends, my own interests. Leon seemed happy just puttering around the house on weekends, working in the yard, watching those boring documentaries he loved. But somewhere around year 3, things started feeling different. Not bad exactly. Just predictable. Leon would come home at the same time every day. We'd have the same conversations, watch the same types of shows. He seemed perfectly content with our routine. But I started feeling like we were more like roommates than husband and wife. The excitement was gone. The spark that made me choose him in the first place. He'd gotten comfortable, stopped putting in the same effort to impress me or surprise me. Our conversations became more functional. Who's picking up groceries? When are we visiting his parents? Did you pay the electric bill? The romance just kind of faded into this domestic efficiency that felt more like running a household than being married to someone who adored you. Leon didn't seem to notice or care. He'd kiss me goodbye in the morning and hello at night like it was just another item on his checklist. I started feeling invisible in my own marriage. The physical side of things slowed down too. Not completely. But it became this occasional thing instead of something we both looked forward to. Leon seemed satisfied with everything staying exactly the same. But I was starting to feel trapped by all that stability I'd once found so attractive. I'd catch myself looking at other couples and wondering if they felt as disconnected as I did. If this was just what marriage became after a few years, I started spending more time with my girlfriends, going out for drinks after work, planning weekend trips without Leon. He never complained, just said he hoped I had fun and he'd see me when I got back. Sometimes I wondered if he even missed me when I was gone, or if he was just relieved to have the house to himself for his boring hobbies. The distance between us kept growing, but Leon acted like everything was perfectly normal. That's when I started noticing Evan at work. He was funny, charming, always had these interesting stories about places he'd traveled and things he'd done. When we'd chat by the coffee machine, or end up staying late on the same projects, the conversation just flowed so naturally. He actually seemed interested in what I had to say, asked questions about my opinions, made me laugh in ways I'd forgotten I could. It felt like being seen again after being invisible for so long. At first it was just friendly workplace conversation, but gradually it became something I looked forward to. Evan would send funny messages throughout the day, little observations about office drama or random thoughts that made me smile. It was harmless, just someone appreciating my personality in ways Leon had stopped doing years ago. When Evan started suggesting we grab drinks after work or meet up for lunch, it felt natural, finally. Someone who wanted to spend time with me because they enjoyed my company. Not because it was part of some marital routine. The messages started getting more personal, more flirty. Evan would compliment how I looked, tell me how much he enjoyed talking to me, hint at how much more interesting I was than other women he knew. It was exactly the kind of attention I'd been craving at home but wasn't getting. Leon barely noticed when I bought new clothes or got my hair done, but Evan would immediately comment on every little change. He made me feel attractive and desirable again, instead of just being someone's predictable wife. When my girlfriend started planning these weekend trips, Evan would joke about how he wished he could join us, how much fun we'd have together without boring husbands around. The idea started seeming less like a joke and more like an actual possibility. Why shouldn't I have some excitement in my life? Leon certainly wasn't providing it. He seemed perfectly happy with his mundane routine, never suggesting we try new things or go new places. If he wasn't going to step up and be the husband I needed, maybe it was time to find that connection elsewhere. The planning for our girls' trips became this whole elaborate thing where we'd coordinate schedules and pick destinations that would be fun and liberating. Evan started hinting about business trips he had coming up to the same cities, how crazy it would be if we ended up in the same place at the same time. The excitement of it all made me feel alive again in ways I hadn't felt in years. Leon never asked detailed questions about my trips, never seemed suspicious or concerned. He'd just kiss me goodbye and tell me to have a good time. By our 6th year of marriage, I was basically living a completely separate life that Leon either didn't notice or didn't care about. The conversations with Evan had become a daily thing, sometimes lasting hours into the evening while Leon watched his boring shows in the other room. We'd talk about everything, our dreams, our frustrations, what we really wanted out of life. Evan actually listened and responded thoughtfully. Unlike Leon, who just nodded along to whatever I said without really engaging. The whole situation was making me realize how much I'd settled in my marriage. Leon was safe and stable, sure, but he was also boring and complacent. He'd stopped growing, stopped trying to impress me or win me over. Meanwhile, here was this exciting, attentive man who actually appreciated everything about me that Leon took for granted. It started feeling like I was wasting my life staying in a marriage that had become more like a business partnership than a romantic relationship. That's when I decided something had to change. Leon and I needed to have a serious conversation about where our marriage was heading and what we both needed to feel fulfilled. I spent weeks thinking about how to approach it, how to explain that we needed to evolve as a couple instead of just accepting this boring routine we'd fallen into. Modern marriages required more flexibility, more openness to new experiences. I researched articles about couples who'd successfully navigated these kinds of transitions, who'd found ways to stay together while still meeting their individual needs. The conversation happened on a Tuesday night after dinner. Leon was loading the dishwasher while I sat at the kitchen table, trying to find the right words to explain what I'd been thinking. When I finally brought up the idea of temporarily opening our marriage, just to explore what we might be missing, his hand stopped moving completely. He turned around and stared at me like I'd suggested we burn the house down. I tried to explain it logically, how we'd grown apart, how we both deserved to feel excited and appreciated, how lots of modern couples were finding ways to stay committed while still experiencing personal growth. I emphasized that it would be temporary, Just a way for us to figure out what we really wanted and needed from each other. Maybe some outside perspective would help us appreciate what we had together. Or maybe we'd discover new things about ourselves that would make our marriage stronger. But Leon just stood there looking at me like I was speaking a foreign language. When he finally responded, his voice was completely flat. If you want an open marriage, then you don't want a marriage at all. You want to be single? I tried to explain that it wasn't about wanting to be single. It was about wanting to feel alive and connected again. But he cut me off. No, I don't share my wife. If that's what you want, then you don't want me. The whole conversation spiraled from there. I called him closed-minded and scared of change. Pointed out that relationships require evolution and growth to survive. He just kept repeating that marriage meant commitment to each other. Period. No sharing. No experimenting. No temporary arrangements. It was so frustrating trying to reason with someone who refused to even consider a different perspective. Leon had always been stubborn, but this was ridiculous. I was trying to save our marriage, and he was acting like I was trying to destroy it. We barely spoke for the next few days. Leon went to work and came home like nothing had happened, while I tried to figure out how to get through to him. The whole situation was making me realize just how incompatible we'd become. Here I was, trying to find mature solutions to our problems, and he was just shutting down completely. It felt like being married to a wall. What I didn't know was that Leon had called his brother during those few days and told him about our conversation. His brother apparently gave him some brilliant advice about checking my phone and computer for evidence of cheating. Because suddenly Leon was acting different, more distant, but also more focused, like he was planning something. I should have paid more attention to the change, but I was too busy dealing with my own frustration about his refusal to work on our marriage. When Leon confronted me with the messages he'd found, the look on his face was so effing dramatic. Like, seriously, you're going to act all betrayed and wounded over some harmless flirting? I tried to explain that it wasn't even a big deal. Evan and I were just talking. Just having fun conversations that Leon was too boring to have with me. But no, he had to turn it into this whole federal case, acting like I'd committed some unforgivable sin. The way he just stood there holding my phone, reading through everything with that pathetic, hurt expression, it was almost embarrassing. I mean, what did he expect? When you stop putting effort into your marriage, when you get all comfortable and lazy, of course your wife is going to look elsewhere for some actual excitement and appreciation. The messages with Evan were just proof that I was still an interesting, attractive person, something Leon had apparently forgotten. Instead of being angry at me, maybe he should have been asking himself why another man was giving me the attention and appreciation that he wasn't. But Leon couldn't see it that way. He was too focused on feeling sorry for himself to understand that his neglect had created this situation in the first place. I tried to explain that I'd been doing this for us, trying to figure out how to bring some life back into our relationship. But he wasn't interested in hearing it. He just kept staring at those messages like they were evidence of some terrible crime, instead of proof that his wife needed things he wasn't providing. The worst part was how quiet he got after that. Instead of fighting about it or trying to work things out, Leon just went completely silent. He'd come home from work, eat dinner without talking, and disappear into his office or the garage. When I tried to bring up counseling or ways we could fix things, he'd just nod and walk away. It was like living with a ghost who happened to share my last name. I figured he was just processing everything and would eventually come around to having a real conversation about our marriage. Leon had always been slow to work through his emotions, preferring to think things over carefully before making decisions. So when weeks went by without any major blow-ups or demands for explanations, I assumed he was finally starting to understand my perspective. Maybe he was even researching therapists or thinking about how we could rebuild our connection. What I didn't realize was that Leon was spending that time meeting with a divorce lawyer and having papers drawn up. While I was at home trying to figure out how to repair our marriage, he was systematically planning to end it. The whole silent treatment thing wasn't him processing, it was him preparing. And he managed to keep it completely secret, which honestly was probably the most decisive thing he'd done in our entire relationship. The day those papers got served at my office was absolutely humiliating. I'm sitting at my desk, trying to focus on work, when this guy in a suit walks up and asks if I'm Destiny Morrison. When I said yes, he handed me this thick envelope and walked away without another word. Everyone in the office was staring, including my boss, and I had no idea what was happening until I opened it and saw a petition for dissolution of marriage at the top of the page. The humiliation was unreal. My coworkers, my boss, the receptionist, they all saw this random guy in a suit hand me divorce papers and walk away. I called Leon immediately. sobbing, begging him to talk this through like adults, offering to do marriage counseling, whatever he wanted, but he wouldn't even pick up the phone. After 4 years of dating and 7 years of marriage, he couldn't even give me the respect of a conversation. Just completely shut me out like I meant nothing to him. Like our entire relationship was disposable. I tried calling his work, his brother, anyone who might be able to get through to him. But apparently he'd warned everyone not to take my calls. He'd turned our whole situation into this dramatic production where I was the villain and he was the innocent victim. Never mind that he'd been neglecting our marriage for years. Never mind that I'd tried to find solutions to our problems. All that mattered was that I'd hurt his precious feelings by having conversations with another man. The legal process was a nightmare. Leon had hired this aggressive lawyer who made me look like some kind of monster instead of a woman who'd been trying to save her marriage. They painted this picture of me as this calculating cheater who'd been planning to betray my husband. When the reality was that I'd been desperately trying to find ways to feel connected to him again. But Leon's version of events made it sound like I'd been living some double life, which was completely unfair. During the court proceedings, I tried to explain to the judge what had really been happening in our marriage, how Leon had become complacent and distant, how I'd been trying to get his attention and work on our problems, how the whole situation had been blown completely out of proportion. I cried explaining how much I love my husband and how I didn't understand why he was throwing away our marriage over some text messages that didn't even mean anything. But Leon just sat there like a stone, not even looking at me while I tried to explain how much our relationship meant to me. His lawyer kept presenting evidence of my affair like it was this elaborate betrayal instead of just some harmless flirting with a coworker. They made it sound like I'd been planning to leave Leon for Evan, which was never even close to being true. I'd been trying to stay married, trying to find ways to make our relationship work. The whole thing felt like a nightmare where everyone had decided I was guilty before I even had a chance to defend myself. Leon's family, who'd always been perfectly nice to me, suddenly treated me like I was some kind of stranger. His brother wouldn't even make eye contact during the proceedings. It was like they'd all collectively decided to rewrite the history of our marriage to make me the bad guy and Leon the innocent victim. When everything was finalized, I lost half of everything we'd built together. The house, our savings, everything. Leon got to keep living in our home while I had to find some crappy apartment and start over completely. And then he had the nerve to block me on all social media, change his phone number, and act like I was some crazy ex instead of the woman who'd loved him when nobody else would. The complete dismissal was almost worse than the divorce itself. For months after everything was finalized, I kept hoping Leon would come to his senses and realize what he'd thrown away. I'd drive by our old house sometimes, just to see if he was taking care of the garden we'd planted together, or if he was letting everything fall apart without me there to keep things organized. The house looked exactly the same, which was somehow even more depressing. Like he was doing just fine without me. I heard through mutual friends that Leon had started going to the gym, hiking on weekends, reconnecting with old friends he hadn't seen much during our marriage. Apparently he was doing all this self-improvement stuff, which was ironic considering he'd refused to work on improving our relationship when we were actually married. It was like he'd needed me to leave before he bothered becoming the interesting, active person I'd been trying to encourage him to be for years. About a year after our divorce was finalized, I was scrolling through Facebook when I saw something that made my blood run cold. Leon had posted pictures from some hiking trip, and he wasn't alone. There was this woman named Marissa in several of the photos, and from the way they were standing together and smiling, it was obvious they were dating. The caption was something sickeningly sweet about new adventures with someone special that made me want to throw my phone across the room. Marissa looked exactly like the kind of basic, boring woman I would have expected Leon to end up with. Nothing special about her appearance. Kind of plain and outdoorsy, probably thought camping was the height of excitement. The type who'd be perfectly content with Leon's simple lifestyle and wouldn't push him to grow or experience anything beyond his comfortable little bubble. She was everything I wasn't. Predictable, undemanding, satisfied with mediocrity. What made it worse was seeing how happy Leon looked in those photos. Happier than I remembered him being during the last few years of our marriage, which was completely unfair. I'd spent years trying to bring some excitement and growth into his life. And here he was grinning like an idiot with some random woman he'd probably known for 5 minutes. It was like he'd completely forgotten everything we'd built together, everything I'd meant to him. I started checking his social media obsessively. trying to figure out how serious this thing with Marissa was and how long it had been going on. They'd apparently met through mutual friends, which meant people in our old social circle were supporting this relationship and helping Leon move on like our marriage had never mattered. The betrayal was unreal. These were people who'd been at our wedding, who'd seen how good Leon and I were together. The more I learned about Marissa, the angrier I got. She worked some boring office job, lived in a basic apartment, had never been anywhere interesting or done anything remarkable. She was exactly the kind of settling choice I would have expected from Leon, someone who wouldn't challenge him or expect him to be better than he was. Meanwhile, I'd spent years trying to help him reach his potential, trying to push him toward a more exciting and fulfilling life. When Leon posted about their 6-month anniversary, complete with photos from some romantic dinner, I completely lost it. 6 months? He'd thrown away 11 years with me and was celebrating 6 months with some random basic woman. Like, it was the greatest achievement of his life. The post had all these comments from people congratulating them and talking about how perfect they were together, which made me absolutely furious. I couldn't just sit there and watch Leon rewrite our entire history while playing house with this inferior replacement. So I started commenting on his posts, just little reminders of our life together and questions about how he could move on so easily from everything we'd shared. Nothing crazy or inappropriate, just honest observations about how quickly he'd forgotten the woman who'd loved him unconditionally for over a decade. But apparently, Leon and his precious new girlfriend couldn't handle a little reality check about his past. Instead of just ignoring my comments like mature adults, they started blocking me from their social media and acting like I was harassing them. It was ridiculous. I had every right to express my feelings about watching my ex-husband parade around with some rebound relationship like it was true love, when the social media blocking didn't stop me from keeping tabs on their relationship. I started finding other ways to stay informed about what Leon was doing. I'd drive by the house sometimes to see if Marissa's car was there, or stop by restaurants where I knew they liked to eat, just to see how serious things really were between them. It wasn't stalking, it was just staying informed about someone who'd been the most important person in my life for over a decade. The few times I ran into them out in public, they acted like I was some kind of threat, instead of just Leon's ex-wife trying to understand how he could move on so easily. Marissa would literally hide behind Leon like I was going to attack her or something, which was completely ridiculous. I just wanted to talk to him, to understand how he could throw away everything we'd built together for someone so obviously beneath what we'd had. Leon wouldn't even make eye contact when I tried to approach them. He'd just grab Marissa's hand and walk away like I was some stranger, instead of the woman who'd been his partner through everything. The disrespect was unbelievable. After everything I'd done for him, everything I'd meant to him, he couldn't even give me 5 minutes of conversation to explain how he could be so heartless. The whole situation was making me realize that Leon had probably been planning to replace me long before our marriage even ended. There was no way someone moves on that quickly and completely unless they'd already been thinking about it for a while. Maybe he'd been the one having an emotional affair, getting advice from his brother about how to get rid of me so he could start fresh with someone new. When I tried to explain this to mutual friends, hoping someone would help Leon see how badly he was handling the situation, they all acted like I was being unreasonable, like wanting to understand how your ex-husband could move on so easily was somehow inappropriate. These were people who'd known us as a couple, who'd seen how good we were together, and they were all just accepting Leon's version of events without question. The final straw was when Leon and Marissa started posting about moving in together, less than a year after our divorce. He was already playing house with this basic replacement, like our 11 years together had meant nothing. The speed of it was insulting and hurtful. And when I tried to express that in messages to Leon, he had the nerve to threaten me with legal action. That's when I realized Leon had been planning this whole thing much more carefully than I'd given him credit for. He'd probably been documenting every interaction we'd had since the divorce, building some kind of case to make me look like the crazy ex-wife instead of the woman who'd been wronged in all of this. The manipulation was incredible. And so, unlike the straightforward man I'd married, when the restraining order papers showed up, I couldn't believe Leon had actually gone through with such a dramatic and unnecessary legal action. 500 feet distance? No contact allowed. Like, I was some kind of dangerous criminal instead of his ex-wife who was still processing the end of our marriage. The whole thing was designed to make me look unstable while protecting his precious new relationship from any uncomfortable truths about how he'd handled our divorce. Sitting in that courtroom while some judge who didn't know anything about our history decided I wasn't allowed to contact the man I'd spent over a decade loving was surreal. Leon sat there, acting like the victim while I was the one who'd lost everything. My marriage, my home, my financial security, and now even the right to express my feelings about how he'd handled everything. The restraining order meant I couldn't even drive by our old house anymore. Couldn't shop at the grocery store we'd always used. Couldn't go to half the places in town without risking legal consequences. Leon had effectively erased me from the life we'd built together, replacing me with someone who'd never push him to grow or challenge him to be better than he was. Now I'm stuck watching from a distance while Leon lives this happy little life with someone who'll never appreciate him the way I did, never understand his potential the way I did, never love him as deeply as I did. Marissa gets to benefit from all the years I spent training him to be a good partner, while I'm left starting over, completely at an age when I should have been settled and secure in the marriage I'd invested everything in building. The whole situation has taught me that some people just can't handle real love, real partnership, real commitment to growth and evolution. Leon wanted the easy path, the comfortable choice, the woman who'd never challenge him to be more than he was. And apparently that's exactly what he found in Marissa, someone perfectly content with mediocrity, someone who'd never push him toward the amazing life we could have built together if he'd just been brave enough to work on our problems, instead of running away from them.